Today's presentation will look at ocean plastics and specifically the cleanup. What we can do to remove plastics from the system either before they reach the ocean or when they get into the ocean. Now we're going to look at this sort of at the different levels. We're going to start with the local level, then we're going to go to the national level, and then we're going to go to the international level. And when I'm talking about local level, this may be local to a specific organization, it may be local to a specific community, or it may be local to a state, but these are done at lower than the state level. They're not done at the governmental level that covers an entire country. There's some key decisions that have been made that are specifically meant to help with the problem of plastics in the ocean. Locally, there are lots of communities which are doing just basic things, like banning the use of plastic bags at grocery stores. Countries like Ireland, parts of North America, and parts of China are doing this even. There are also groups doing coastal cleanups and inserting plastic traps at the mouth of rivers, and you can see that in the images on the screen. One thing in South Australia was noted for this, in the article we read. One thing that is becoming increasingly popular is having a refund system for plastic bottles, as well as glass and aluminum bottles, but plastic bottles are what we're focused on, because plastics aren't necessarily seen as valuable, but plastic bottles are one of the worst polluters in oceans and other waterways. And so having this plastic refund in a place like South Australia has dramatically cut the amount of water bottles being seen going into the waterways there. Now, nationally, there's programs going on across the world. One of specific note is in Scotland, where Scotland and various organizations, national organizations in Scotland, are teaming up with fishermen, and those fishermen are actually collecting ocean refuse, ocean garbage, especially the most extreme of this ocean garbage, which are those ghost nets that we talked about, which capture all sorts of ocean wildlife in them, and sort of end up as a big ball of floating junk in the middle of the ocean. Now in Northern Australia, which is the image you see in front of you, there's a big gulf called the Gulf of Carpentaria. And the Gulf of Carpentaria, you can see it, if you look on this map of Australia, is right in the northeast corner. And now on this big map is right on the northeast corner, and it shares coastline with both Queensland, Northern Queensland, and the Northern Territory. And in the winter, during the monsoon months, there's this big gyre that forms because of the direction of the wind and the increased rain in this area. So a big gyre forms in the Gulf, and it brings a lot of the ocean refuse down into the Gulf from Southeast Asia. And so the Gulf ends up with a heap of ghost nets and other trash that come in from Southeast Asia. And you can see in this images an image of a turtle, and sea turtles are very popular. I think 6 of the 7 types of sea turtles in the world are in the Gulf of Carpentaria. But you also see nets that are abandoned with illegal fishing being brought in, and these nets are extremely hazardous to the wildlife in this region. So they search for them with vessels, but they also go to the expense of searching for these floating nets with helicopters. That's how important it is to them. And this is all government funded. Now, the biggest problem is in a place like the Gulf of Carpentaria, when you get them in, what do you do with this junk? This is an extremely rural area, so there's a couple different things you can do. You can burn junk, but burning plastic, A, doesn't get rid of all the plastic, and B, causes a great deal of toxic fumes that go into the air, and it leach into the groundwater as it melts. You can send it for recycling, but recycling these huge plastic nets is hard to do, so you actually have to send them off to faraway places. So you can throw them in a tip, but obviously tips burying waste is not ideal because it leaches into groundwater. So what a lot of these nets are doing is they're going to local artists and they're being made into art. And you can see an example of this art in this sea turtle, which is made out of old fishing nets. Finally, there's the international level, so the highest level where states are coordinating a response. Now, you can see on the left, the UN has the United Nations Environment Program, which tries to educate and talk to member organizations about ocean pollution. And then there's MARPOL, which is the acronym for International Convention on Marine Pollution from Ships. And MARPOL is meant to be the convention that deals with pollution specifically from shipping in the ocean. It limits dumping of both waste products and garbage in the ocean. The big problem is it's next to impossible to actually police any of these things on the high seas. There's too much space, too much open ocean to catch most of these people, and at the UN level, the UN has no real power to enforce much of this stuff. So despite the fact that we see ocean pollution occurring still, and there's an increased buildup of ocean pollution, there's certainly different levels that are trying to deal with this problem to mitigate what is happening.